Hello and welcome to Lewis Hamilton finally turns up at Ferrari week, and we couldn't let the week go by without at least having some views on it. And the week has essentially been a giant tease of Lewis initially turning up at Maranello looking like the Godfather, finally seeing him in the fabled red suit the next day, and then heading off to do some laps around Fiorano. And after the end of last season, where by his own admission he just wanted it to come to an end, this seemed like a fresh start, and Lewis seemed pretty happy. And like the true champ that he is, he even brought his mum and his dad to come and watch, alongside what looks like all of Italy and perhaps every Formula One journalist in existence. Good on him. That's the kind of draw we want to see. But Lewis cannot be going there just for a holiday. He can't be going there just because he wants to tick off "I went to Ferrari" from his F1 bucket list. "I've wanted to drive there ever since I was a kid," he says. And there he is fawning over the Ferrari F40. Great, brilliant. It's not about that, man. Lewis needs to win races, and the reason that we were all so excited about Lewis going to Ferrari in the first place is because, given how bad Mercedes have been, perhaps there was an opportunity at another team to get that elusive 8th title. Now, Lewis has two big hurdles if he's going to make that 8th World Championship happen. The first is the fire-breathing titan that he has become in the other car, Charles Leclerc, who has an unbeaten qualifying record across his seasons in Formula One since 2018. And we know that Lewis's big Achilles heel, especially in 2023, was his qualifying pace. But the second thing is the car. What is the car going to be like? Ferrari have decided to launch an all-new car for 2025. In the words of Frédéric Vasseur, we are going to see that the 2025 car will have less than 1% of the parts in common with the 2024 car. Now, given that Ferrari actually ended up at the end of last season with probably just about the quickest car, maybe it was nip and tuck with McLaren, but it was pretty close. That should start ringing some alarm bells. But we also have to think that when we went back to the beginning of 2024, actually their evolution from 23 was quite conservative. We did a video of this back at the beginning of 2024, at the beginning of this YouTube channel, where we talked about what Ferrari needed to get out of their 2024 car, and the main thing had been that they needed to maintain the one lap pace that they had in 2023, but add in race performance, which they didn't have throughout much of 2023. And actually last season they seemed to get most of that. There was a bit too much of a trade-off between qualifying pace and the gains that they subsequently got from their race pace, but by and large they did build a more rounded, competitive car. But that's all going in the bin, apparently, and we're going to see something completely different. So let's hammer into a little bit of detail about what some of those changes might be. And there was an article in The Race, I think yesterday, in which they talked about the front suspension on the Ferrari changing from a pushrod suspension to a pull rod suspension. Oh my god, what the heck are those? Well, we did a handy video about just those things back at the beginning. I will put a link to that video at the end of this one, but just to quickly go over what that means again before we get into the heat of pre-season testing, and we're going to be talking about all these terms again. Formula One cars are suspended using a double wishbone design. What does a double wishbone look like? This is what a double wishbone looks like. This is the 2014 Ferrari F14 as driven by Kimi Räikkönen and Fernando Alonso. And highlighted in yellow is the wishbone. It looks just like the wishbone on your Christmas turkey. There's two of those, one at the top, one at the bottom. And in the middle of that, highlighted here in magenta, is the track rod. The track rod is essentially what defines whether a suspension is push rod or pull rod. So this is an axial or a front-on view of the car with the nose essentially cut off to show you the damper, the track rod and the wishbones. And this is a nice little picture that was that we were allowed to use earlier in the year by a chap called Will Davies, that you can find on Twitter at not only a hat track, but also this particular picture you can get from the Side podcast website. It's quite an old picture, but actually it's still, I think, the best demonstration of a push rod and a pull rod. So what does the diagram show? So the diagram shows the wishbones on both sides in black. You can see those at the top and on the bottom on both the left and then on the right. And you can see the track rods on the highlighted in different colours. On the left it's in red, on the right it's in blue. On the left you can see a pull rod design, on the right you can see a push rod design. The pull rod design, handily in red, is what Ferrari are going to move to in 2025, we think. What does that actually mean? Well, the track rod is attached to a rocker, which is then attached to a damper. And that is important. Whether it's pull rod or push rod, essentially the system works the same. It's just they work in reverse, depending on which of those two systems you have. But when the car is pushed down under aerodynamic load, or is braking, or it's accelerating, load is put through the suspension, which would break if there was no damping to it. But the track rod allows that damping from the damper to be transferred to the wishbones. So when the car is pushed down, the track rod pushes in a push rod or pulls in a pull rod on the rocker, and that then allows the car to stay level under that aerodynamic or mechanical load. That's what it does. And whether you use a push rod or a pull rod, essentially it does the same thing. But there are some advantages and disadvantages. So there are clear aerodynamic and packaging benefits for either of them. So with a push rod, i.e. where the rocker is at the top, it means that the weight is up a bit higher, but it does free up the bottom of the chassis to either cut it away to allow better airflow, or to put another aerodynamic device there to aid flow to the back of the car. In a pull rod design, the rocker is down low, and that means the center of gravity is much lower. That aids your weight distribution. So there are advantages and disadvantages from an aero and a mechanical point of view. But the race actually had an interesting comment about this, and they said that Gary Anderson, who's their technical expert, talked about the pull rod suspension at the front allowing finer control of the front suspension. Okay, why is that important? It means that you can essentially run the car softer in slower corners, so that you get better grip, which is what you need in those better mechanical grip, which is what you need in those slower corners. Whereas in the high speed corners, when the car is pushed right down, that pull rod suspension will allow the suspension to be a bit stiffer and therefore more stable, and therefore you don't get the car getting out of shape in the high speed corners. How does that fit in with what Lewis wants? Well, towards the end of last season, remember that one of the things that Lewis was really struggling with was under braking. The cars were staying level. He just wasn't getting that feeling under braking, and then he was having to turn the car on the throttle much later in the corner compared to what other drivers were having to do, and that was just taking life out of his rear tyres, because they were having to smear themselves across the tarmac every time he took a slow corner. That's ultimately where F1 drivers get their pace from, is in the slower corners, not the faster ones. So could this be something that allows Lewis to get the feeling he needs under that late braking into the slower corners that defines his style? Is this something that allows him to feel the car a bit better and be able to manipulate the transition from the straight into the corner, that slip, a little bit better than he has been in the Mercedes. And if he can, and if that's a fundamental change, then perhaps, even if it seems like Revolution is not the way to go at Ferrari, perhaps it might be the thing that Lewis Hamilton needs. I can't wait for all this speculation to end. Bring on testing. Bring on the first qualifying of 2025 back in Melbourne where it should be. I can't wait to find out. As usual, if you like what we're doing here, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one and we'll reply to as many as we possibly can. You will see me and Ammar back later this week with some more greatest of all time videos. See you soon.